How Vyaire Medical scaled production with healthy data to combat COVID-19. So I'm Ed Rybicki, the SVP and CIO at Vyaire Medical. Vyaire is a medical device manufacturer with a long history in respiratory products. We make well over 25,000 unique products in the respiratory area, all to do with helping people extend their lives by healthier breathing. Some of the products we make, I'm sure you've probably heard of in the past year. We make 8 different lines of ventilators, but we make everything from a simple tube that carries oxygen to an incredibly complex diagnostic machine. But again, everything to do with respiratory products. So today, I'm here to talk about, as we say, a situation no one could predict. Quite openly, when I think back to now, it was a little over a year ago, and I think probably best told by exactly how it happened is as COVID was making its way around the world, and as we in Vyaire, being a respiratory company, were still trying to understand the impact that it was going to have on us and on our business. We had just made the decision, like many companies, to go remote. So this was kind of the first realization that this was going to have an impact, but it was still within our business and our company. But it's kind of like seeing maybe this tidal wave way out on the horizon, and it's coming and it's coming. And it was, as I remember, really a Sunday afternoon that I was called by one of my peers, the head of engineering, and she said, "Look, we need to get on a call with some of the consultants we had helping us, and as well with this other company called Spirit, who we think is going to be a manufacturing partner." And quickly for us, it started with one call on a weekend that was an absolute moment of both exhilaration, knowing that we were now really getting into this fight, probably mixed with terror, knowing that we had a road ahead of us that nobody could absolutely predict. So today I'm going to take you through that a little bit, what came through, how we did it, and how data has played such a huge part in Vyaire helping address the COVID pandemic. So to really sum up, we relied on this healthy data environment. We built this, it actually started a bit before COVID. So we had already identified a need within Vyaire to have better, cleaner, healthier data so we could run our business. I mean, we're not unlike any other company. And I'll go through it a little bit more in terms of the challenges we had. But the reality is we knew data was a big piece of it. So luckily we had started that journey a bit before the pandemic hit. But as I described, as that pandemic hit, the need for data became so critical. As you can imagine, we have now people working remote. We were partnering with Spirit Aerospace, who's a plane manufacturer. Normally they're working for Boeing and other companies to manufacture parts of planes, but we connected with them as a partner to build ventilators because we didn't have the internal capacity, and they were in a highly regulated environment that very much fit what we have to do in building life-saving devices like ventilators. We knew we had to connect everything. We had to connect everything from the very base floor all the way up to the boardroom. And again, remember, we now had everybody working remote unless you were in a factory. So now you have a CEO, a CFO, a COO, heads of manufacturing that weren't maybe in the plant, supply chain people, all needing the same data at the same time to make this go well and ramping up at unprecedented levels. We had been on the path to unify this with a single source of truth, and we hear that a lot in industry. But for us, this really came to fruition. And if there was an automotive analogy, if there was a stepping on the gas pedal, this was our stepping on the gas pedal moment. Let me take you through how we did some of that. Before I actually give you the story, let me tell you what we accomplished. We went from building maybe 6 ventilators a day up to 600 a day. Now, a ventilator, for those who don't know, I mean, it's a pretty complex product. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's obviously the intent of a ventilator is meaning if you're on one, you can't breathe on your own. It is acting like artificial lungs, and it's helping you breathe and hopefully giving your body the opportunity to heal. So this is a product that's highly regulated, highly complex. and not something that normally you're building at such a high volume. But based on the pandemic and the needs of the world, that volume couldn't have been fast enough. So we had to figure out how to scale. And some of these ventilator lines had been in production for maybe 15 years, and normally at a pace of, let's say, 6 a day. So we had to scale that up to 600 a day. At the same time, we had to drastically reduce errors and quality issues. Normally, as you go through building this kind of product, there's a lot of quality stages. And so we call that first pass yield. If it gets past a stage, it's got a good first pass yield. Typically, because you're not building them at a very fast speed, you're erring on the side of quality, which means you get a lot of stage failures and you go back and make sure that things are working properly. It's a very typical part of the process. Here, we don't have time for that, right? You are now building at mass production. You don't have any longer the luxury of time. So now we had to also increase first pass yield of these machines greatly. And again, we had to do that all being in a remote scenario other than people on the factory floor with an extraordinarily set of systems. So let's go through how we did some of that. So going back a little bit to give context on how we did this, Vyaire, like I said, has been a company that's been around for quite a long time, or its products have, but actually Vyaire itself has only been around since around 2018. It had been part of other companies, and about every 5 years, this division of a larger company had generally changed hands. So what you get, and as many of you in an IT audience can appreciate, every time somebody new took this division, it got absorbed as part of a bigger company, you layered on some technology, and then you layered on more technology, and so on and so on. Rarely did anybody decouple that or reduce the layers. So when we became a standalone company around 2018, we had 12 ERP systems, for example, among about 300 other pieces of software running a billion-dollar business. The systems were not made to scale. Quite openly, some of the ERP systems we had running, I had never heard of in my career. So these were not made to scale, but they were very specific to the jobs, and they were doing the jobs well, especially at a low manufacturing scale. Other challenges we had, difficult really to track our customers and understand them. As anybody with multiple ERP systems can understand, multiple ERPs mean multiple order to cash, multiple manufacturing. That means a product is not a product across a same set of systems, or a customer is not the same customer. You did not have good master data across all these systems because they were operating fairly autonomously. So we had challenges there as well, not only in building, but in really understanding where these products needed to go, and then in tracking cash all the way through. Now, again, when you're moving at a slower pace, the problems can be handled sometimes with just brute force. When you're moving at such a fast pace, you need a different set of tools. The other thing we were facing is we really had no data in analytics. We had people grabbing data out of systems, putting it together in spreadsheets, and sending it around. That sounds familiar to any of you. I know many of us have dealt with that over the past. The difference here is we had that, again, across many different systems, across kind of a fragmented business model around the world. And now we were faced with needing to galvanize quickly as a company, as a process, and from a data perspective, because we had obviously a different mission now. It wasn't just a mission about, okay, how do we get customers good products? It was really a mission of how do we save lives. So when we looked at the data and analytics piece, we first really created this vision. And two words I think in here, flexibility and platform, are the two big words to key off of. We absolutely took a platform approach from day one. So maybe some of you in IT have experienced this. When you have assets that you're trying to evolve, especially with the way technology moves, sometimes that gets challenging, right? You bought something maybe 5 years ago, and now the technology is fully changed, but it's hard to convince and it's hard to justify to spend the money to maybe make that revolutionary change. Our benefit was we had very little. Like I said, we had Excel, more or less. We had a couple BI tools, but again, it was mostly, there was no data warehouse, there was no data lake, there was no data infrastructure. So it was just a lot of manual pulling of data out of systems. So when we decided to build this, we said platform approach, flexibility, because whatever use cases we started out with, we had an assumption is that those use cases would explode. Now, we didn't know how much or how fast, but we had that assumption going in. We also wanted to reduce that cost to infrastructure. So we said cloud first. We knew we needed to be able to pivot and scale because that's just the way business runs now. And for us, it was a cloud first approach. And we knew we also needed to make sure that there was harmony across the systems as well, because doing it for one of those 12 ERPs was not going to get us there. So we talked about being cloud ready. We talked about being simple, right? I mean, that concept of that one solution that everybody can use has been a tough one in the BI industry. You're never going to get rid of Excel. And by the way, we haven't either. But we did have some other tools in the portfolio that were either used in very local pockets around the world or underused. And we really tried to drive a one single place, one portal for everybody to use. So even their cherished Excel files, if that was still the right type of file to use, we would put it in the portal. So we formed this container, and so it would be simple. We had to make sure the data was really grounded in trust. And so luckily, based on the way the company was operating, and I already gave you kind of the Excel examples, there were many instances of where people didn't trust the data. I remember joining in the COO at the time, and as I met him and talked to him and I said, what are some of your biggest problems? He said, look, today I get 5 different reports for this one topic every day. I have no idea which one of the 5 are correct. And, that spoke volumes to me of saying there's a lot of people, a lot of effort, a lot of manual effort going on, but we needed really a holistic solution that we could also certify the metric that that guy was looking at or that anybody was looking at. So they knew if they were looking at it, it wouldn't be one of 5 and he would have to guess which one it was, that this would be an enterprise-wide, and I always say certified metric that everybody agrees this is the way we calculate this metric. And now we're going to publish it here. So we are all operating off of the same set of data and we can all use it to make the same decisions. I used this example before, is that, before we had this solution, it was like driving a car with no lights on at night with the windshield blacked out. You had no idea where you were going and you just did the best you could. And the last one, we had to make sure it was fast. The time to value had to be there. And so that's always challenging with a platform approach because there is a bit of, if you build it, they will come kind of approach to when you use the ability to build a platform. So we also knew that some of that upfront investment had to be delivered by back-end speed. So meaning we would take some time upfront to build the platform, but then once we got rolling, we would be able to quickly turn out new metrics, dashboards, KPIs. And that was part of what was the value proposition of when we said we're going to take this approach. So what do we build? I mean, this is your least architectural slide afterwards, but I promise you I've got one that's a little more detailed than this. So ultimately, we built cloud first. We partnered with 2 key partners. Talend was a key partner for us to move the data around, and AWS was a key partner to store the data and harmonize the data, and we used their QuickSight BI tool to present the data. So we looked at, again, a ground up architecture. We started moving all of our data, and we had already been moving our infrastructure to the cloud. So we had one other benefit there, that we had already started that journey. Now that we had the servers and the infrastructure in the cloud, the data was there. So now we could start grabbing it, aggregating it, putting it into the AWS data lake, and using Talend to move all that data and harmonize it for us. Our teams then really worked across both IT and different layers of the business to try to harmonize and get to that source of truth. So there's a big master data management effort that was going on in parallel to the business intelligence effort, but it's all in one platform. We got to be able to achieve that single source of truth. I mean, and we're still going. I mean, it's not that we've taken every single element of data across every system, but we started with a core set of KPIs and we harmonized those, and we worked really hard on the human change management, all of that, because technology wise, we could get all the data in one place, but getting, those 5 people that used to send those 5 reports out to agree on which way to calculate that metric was really where some of the secret sauce was. Ultimately, we have that confidence in quality and data and analytics now. That came all the way back to the story of the pandemic as we started to build out that factory. And we built a net new factory partnering with Spirit in about 90 days. And there was a tremendous amount of IT activity. We had to move systems to the cloud. We had to strengthen things. We had to really rip into the code and change things to do things at a volume that they were never designed to do. But all along that time, we were launching this analytics platform, and it became the lifeblood of how our decision makers were looking at what we were doing day in and day out to make sure that we could position ourselves. So I promised you there was another architecture picture, and I also promised you I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we want you to see a little bit of what we consider a best of breed architecture. And so just very simply, we took all those many sources, we used Talend to move them through an Amazon data lake, and then there's a whole set of AWS services there that we carefully selected and worked both with Talend and AWS to figure out which ones are the right services that we've bundled together. So this really makes up our data platform. So it's not just a data lake, it's not just an ETL tool, it's a lot of different pieces, but they're all designed to work together in harmony as one. And what it really gives us at the end is a very easy, a very extendable, 24/7, always on any device BI tool that our business can go to. Doesn't matter where they are or what device they have in their hands, they can get at it and they can see dynamic data being refreshed all the way, like we said, from the factory floor up to the highest aggregator boardroom level. So where are we going next with this? Because there's so many possibilities. We got through a large part. We're on the downside, at least our business, of the pandemic response. While we were ramping up, at some point we knew that the world wouldn't need so many ventilators, for example, and we're seeing that we're ramping down. And we hope that certainly never to mix a business message with a personal message from a pandemic standpoint. While I'm concentrating on business, I know a lot of people have been affected negatively by the pandemic. And for us, we were glad that we could help during a certain piece of time. But ultimately, again, as we talk through the business side of it, I never want to forget that there's really a lot of personal tragedy by this. So we were happy that we could help and expand that. But we also knew that this was not a single purpose build. So our solution, as I said, is a platform, and we're starting to leverage that in many other ways. AI is a capability that we're now using to predict demand. So if I had this maybe a year ago, I would have seen that demand coming to us, as opposed to getting a call on Sunday and saying, hey, we have to build a factory and you have to get all the systems ready, right? We may have seen that, and that's what we're trying to do now so we can understand and predict more of this. We're able to ingest many external sources now because we have that platform, and because there are things like the AWS Data Exchange. We're able to now just pull directly into our platform, and we're testing out different sources, everything from Dun & Bradstreet to weather patterns to a lot of healthcare data that's been made available and that can be easily ingested, so we can now get better at predicting. And probably the last one that's really interesting for us as a company, a lot of companies, and we are included in on this, are pivoting their business models away from traditional products, tangible capital products, to software. Our customers are asking us, how can they get better? For example, again, using ventilators. You might have one respiratory therapist for 10 to 20 rooms of people on ventilators at any time during a shift. That's a lot of different rooms and people for that person maintained. So we're building an app that they can have on their phone that they can see and make adjustments on those ventilation patients, so they know they can get them healthier faster. Huge business advantage, huge person advantage, a huge health advantage to doing things like this. So we are absolutely taking that same platform in finding use case after use case after use case that not only helps our business, but certainly helps our customers. And at the end, it helps save lives. So with that, hopefully you gain some insight into what we're doing. And by the way, that's what we called our portal, the Insight Portal. So that's taken on a whole different flavor within Vyaire. There's probably not a day it doesn't go by or a meeting doesn't go by I don't hear, well, I got that out of Insight. So I'd like to thank you for joining me. Certainly encourage any of you that have interest in this to ping me on LinkedIn or reach out to me. Always happy to share more of the story. And we certainly hope that that you enjoyed what you heard today. Thank you.